Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brice Lewis. The jam-packed show for you today. Obviously, we're talking about more things basketball. We're going to talk about all types of things that, related to the game, any news updates that's out there potentially on the spectrum of basketball. We're going to talk about, just some things. Again, the NBA is continuing to plan to try to get the regular season back up and going. Obviously, it's unlikely you can do it in every arena in the United States, so they're trying to maybe find a particular venue, which we will discuss here, plus some other NBA news. Plus, we're going to play a game called Max or No Max, where we talk about players who are going to go into the free agency market next year who are eligible to get the max contract, and I'll tell you if I give them a max or not. We also have other news and story headlines, like obviously they're talking about for this year's playoffs. If they went ahead and start the playoffs, they'd have a play-in for the last two seeds for the playoffs this year. And we'll talk about maybe in the future, would that be an idea they could keep going into the future? We'll also talk about who's the most influential player in the game. Will the center position ever make a comeback? And how, at the end of the show, I would reveal the Detroit Pistons, something I've been doing to kind of end my shows. Just, give some more team spotlight, some team love on there. So, obviously, we're going to talk about all that here and more on the podcast. As, like I said, we're going to continue to go what we out here. Obviously, not as much content out there, but we're going to go with what we have and make some things and, just give us a great time for us to talk about anything that we feel like is worth talking about, mentioning, or like I said, talked about in circles, talked about in barbershops, and we're going to talk about it here on the podcast over these next few weeks and going on into the future. Obviously, I'll give you more updates if the NBA has any more things happening for them and all of that. But we're going to continue right now, like I said, with the update on the NBA potentially playing the season if they do start back in one venue. And one venue that has been discussed is Disneyland. I mean, Disney World. Sorry, I get it mixed up sometimes. That's my bad. Disney World. So, obviously, the NBA is trying to find a place where they can play their games. Because, obviously, it's still a little unsafe to play it in multiple venues around the United States. So you're looking maybe for that one common venue, and I think Disney World is somewhere they're thinking about playing their games. Obviously, again, I would think this would be with no audience, no crowd. So this would just be, listen, I don't even know if Disney World has courts. Maybe they do. I haven't been before in my life. Surprisingly, I've never been. Want to one day. But I don't know. Do they have courts down there? If they don't, I'm assuming they'll build a court. I guess it won't take that long to build an arena, a court, if they needed to. I think it'll be an interesting place for them to do it. It'd just be interesting because, Disney World does have places you can house the players because people live literally at Disney World. Sometimes during vacations you can get places there. I'm not sure if you're going to have them living in the palace or whatever, but they have places around there they could keep the players. I think what also this move dictates is that a lot of people feel like they won't be going back to the regular season because of all this uncertainty, so they're going to go straight to playoffs. It's just, like I said, they're going to give some weeks ahead of time to train and get prepared, and then they're going to have to play in games for the last two playoff spots in each conference, and then they're going to go into the playoffs, and we're going to start, I'm assuming, as far as we know, 7-game series, and we're going to go from there. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with terms of that. Again, if it's Disney World, it'll be a very interesting place to have it. Obviously, most big companies, or almost every big company like ESPN and Fox, is owned by Disney. So it's not surprising that, Disney may be like, okay, well, what if we just have it at one of our, destinations, one of our resorts? And, that way, we can kind of keep an eye on everything. Because again, even though it is ESPN, even though it is anybody who has a TV deal, If it's under Disney, Disney's under Watch Fly, even with the NBA and everything. So maybe doing it there might be productive for them. And obviously it gives everybody a common, every team has a common spot. You don't have to travel. Listen, you don't have to do all the travel, all the gruelingness of a regular season or of a playoffs, traveling sometimes when you get to road games. Everything's going to be at the same place. So literally you're just waking up, going through whatever the coaching staff does and going from there. Obviously, we would have to see about practices. Would they be able to have practices? Like it would just be very interesting how they would get that all settled up with the resources that they have there, as that's not obviously a true basketball place/arena. So like I said, it'll be very interesting to kind of see what happens and what goes from there. I know, again, if they started opening up facilities for teams, the Atlanta Hawks said, Travis Slink said he will not be opening up the facilities yet. I know the Lakers have been reported to try to potentially get their facilities opened back up to them by the 15th of May. So obviously some cities and some teams are trying to get in place to potentially open back up to allow their players to maybe get back in the gym, working together, working by themselves, getting back in shape. Obviously, I'm sure, so like I said, some players have courts at home and gyms at home, and they're doing everything they can there, but sometimes being able to be in contact with the team doctors and team trainers and just your fellow teammates can also sometimes help out in those situations. So obviously that's going to be a very big discussion point for the months to come to see what actually happens when it comes to moving forward and progressing forward with the NBA season. The Knicks decided to keep Scott Perry as the general manager. Leon Rose decided to go ahead and keep him in his spot, giving him another year with the Knicks brass. Obviously, I'm very familiar with Scott Perry as he was GM previously of the Atlanta Hawks. Wasn't bad when he was here, just had the little, he had the little issue here, a little racial, insensitivity here. So which got him out of the job. But he wasn't doing bad. He was a part of the reason why we won 60 games. He built that team together, and obviously he has a track record, obviously, from being under the Spurs, being able to build teams. And so I definitely understand this decision, leaving him in place at the Knicks of the general manager. Especially, like I said, with all the stuff going on right now, this might be a very interesting year when it comes to hiring and firing, because since you don't really have the ability to kind of, you could talk to him over the phone, of course, but you don't have the ability to really get in contact with guys and them come to you. Like, think about if COVID-19 is still going into September, October, November. You hire a new head coach, you hire a new GM. Maybe the GM won't have as much, but think about the head coach. Technically, they're not even letting the players talk to the coaches except through Zoom. So yeah, you may be able to do it from there, but sometimes it'll be difficult not to have that in-person experience. So that can sometimes hinder the coaching and the experiences and the relationships with the players. So, I feel like you'll see a lot of front office guys and head coaches keep their job. Like the Kings already announced that Fabi Divac and Luke Walton's coming back for another year. And like I said, I understand why. Because it's just like, with all this stuff going on, do we really have the time? Is this a good year to fire a guy or let go of a guy when all of this is going on? When there's so much uncertainty? Would it be a good idea for us to try to start over at a certain spot in our organization, not even knowing when he can actually even get into the building and actually work with us directly? With all that uncertainty, I think a lot of people are just going to go with what they know because at least there's familiarity. And then, hopefully that familiarity will help them moving into the future so then they can go ahead and continue to move forward with the plans of the franchise. Like I said, this could save some coaches who might have been destined to be fired this year. And, we'll have to just see what happens when everything is back to running as normal with everybody who's involved. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what actually ends up going on when it comes to all that. And lastly, Lemelo Ball has officially entered the draft. Obviously, I brought up Lemelo Ball a couple of times on this show recently. He is officially declared, like I said, he's a top 3 prospect in this year's NBA draft. And like I said, he's expected to go top 3. We'll see who is the top 3 picks. We'll see when the lottery is done. And we'll know kind of where team needs are and who's going to pick who. Obviously, last show I reported that Washington, the Washington Wizards had interest in Lemelo Ball, bringing him in. They're potentially replacing John Wall as the point guard of the future. And I'm sure other teams that may have maybe a need or wanting to make the upgrade at point guard might look at also Lemelo Ball in that regard. So we'll have to see what happens. Obviously, Lemelo Ball has been playing professional ball for the last couple of years, which I think has really helped his game as it's shown in some situations. So obviously that'll be very interesting to see what happens moving on next into the draft process, even though this will be a weird draft process coming up. But coming up next on the GSMC Basketball Podcast, we're going to play the game Max or No Max, where I'll discuss free agents coming up this offseason and discuss if I give them a max or not right here on the podcast.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we discussed some things. We discussed the NBA potentially starting the season, just going ahead and finishing the season at Disney World in Orlando, Florida, going ahead and just playing the season there. Potential place for them to just have all their games, playoff series and everything is Disney World, as that's something that has been discussed right now in NBA circles. We'll see if they can maybe come to an agreement on where they want to play these games if the season comes back, but that is a place that has been mentioned. We also discussed the Knicks keeping Scott Perry as the GM of the Knicks. This is a year where you won't see a lot of firings because of just the uncertainty of COVID-19. It's not really the bestest time unless you just have to make the change to go ahead and make a change. You may see guys who are interim coaches stay on now because of this. I mean, you might still get a guy who can get hired in there, but we'll have to see. It depends on how the season goes. And also, we discussed Lemelo Ball going ahead and entering his name officially into the NBA draft and going ahead and potentially becoming a top 3 pick in this year's draft, as he's one of the most touted players coming out of this year's class. Now we're going to play a game called Mix, Max, or No Max. Obviously, I'll name a player. I'll tell you if I give them the max contract or not, and I'll give you a reason. We're going to play with a couple of guys that, was on the free agency list, and I'll give you my opinions if they should get a max or no max. And so, to start off, First person, Anthony Davis. Obviously, this is more of a very clear, easy one. Anthony Davis, I would give Anthony Davis the max. He's a top 5 player in the game, and if you're a top 5 player in the game, you get a max contract. That's as simple as I can put it to you. And I feel like also in the Lakers situation, ain't no way he gonna come back if he ain't getting the max, because somebody else is going to offer him the max. So the max deal is definitely going to Anthony Davis. Like I said, he is probably one of the top 5 players in the game. And, with him and LeBron James, that great combination they have in LA, I think LA is going to do anything they can to bring back Anthony Davis this offseason when free agency starts. And I definitely think he will be getting that max deal. Next up, Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry has been paid the max before, but this time I'm going to go ahead and say no max. Lowry's over 30, so he's kind of entering somewhat of the down years of his NBA career potentially. Still a solid player, can still play, can still start. I just think that he's not a guy that you would want to invest that kind of money into at this point of his career. He's a good guy. I mean, you could give him something you can give him something shorter than that. Still a good amount of money though, but just nothing max. I would not give Kyle Lowry a max. I would not invest that type of money into a guy who's over 30. Usually you invest that in the guys in their 20s, and so I definitely do not think Kyle Lowry is deserving of another max contract because of his age and just the kind of player he is in general. Listen, when they gave him the max contract last time, people were very like, oh, you're really going to give him that deal, you're really going to give him that money, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really, the thing that's kind of going there. And so that's going to be my thought process on Kyle Lowry. Next up, Danilo Gallinari. I wouldn't give Danilo Gallinari the max, but I give him something. I wouldn't even say anything close, but close, but not close, if that makes sense. He's a good player though. He can start for you. He can come off the bench, give you 18, 20 a game, can shoot the three. He's shooting at a high 3-point percentage this year with Oklahoma City. A guy who, he always seemed like a guy who had the potential to really be a top end player. Not in terms of top 5, but just a very good, solid player at best, maybe a number 2 option. And just had injuries have just completely, kept him from reaching his career potential. But even this year with Oklahoma City, he has played extremely well. A flexible 3-4 guy, can play guard multiple positions, and like I said, can stretch the 4. So I definitely want to give him a max, but I definitely think he deserves to get paid. DeMar DeRozan. I do not think DeMar DeRozan deserves the max. The reason why is just because it's just the game. He's a 2-point mid-range shooter. He is not a 3-point guy. In this league, you ain't paying a guy who can't shoot a 3 the max. It's just looked down upon, and I also think just in the game now, DeMar DeRozan's game would be great in the 90s, but now it's not going to work. Yeah, it's great. We know if we need a 1-point or 2-point basket, and we got DeMar DeRozan on our team, well, we know how good he is from mid-range, but 3-point, he's basically out of the picture. Think about if he's your second option. You only got one, you know what I'm saying? I think DeMar DeRozan is a guy who also is getting older up there in his career, but I also just feel like with his game the way it is, I don't think it would be justifiable for him to get a max contract, especially after what's happened with the San Antonio Spurs and just everything. I just think, again, you pay him kind of like Kyle Lowry, his old former teammate, but you don't give him the max. I just think that with his, like I said, with the game being the way it is today and DeMar DeRozan's game being the way it is, I just don't think you go ahead and give him the max deal there. I just don't see it. Andre Drummond. Obviously, Andre Drummond, same way with DeMar DeRozan. No max. His game just doesn't equal max money. If DeMar DeRozan could hit the mid-range, not DeMar DeRozan, but Andre Drummond could hit the mid-range, then I could maybe go ahead and say, okay, I could see it because he's going to get you 13, 14 rebounds. Remember, he's averaging a career high in points this season. So he's been doing more work on the offensive end. If he had a mid-range shot, then maybe we could sit here and say, okay, you could maybe make an argument for him getting the max. But with him just being a traditional in the paint kind of center, I just think, like I said, in today's NBA, that's not as valuable as it used to be. Like I said, this was early 2090s. He would be very valuable. With today's game in 2020, I don't see someone going out of their way and paying him that. That's one of the reasons why, Detroit had to move off of him, because they realized we can't pay a guy like him, especially with us being in mediocrity, paying a guy like about Andre Drummond a max contract. You just can't. You don't see it. You can't do it. Cleveland, even though they have him, probably won't give him the max. I think a lot of teams are going to be very hesitant to give him the max, and I don't think DeMar DeRozan. I keep saying DeMar DeRozan. I don't know why I'm still on DeMar DeRozan. I apologize. Andre Drummond is not going to get the max. That's one reason why I also think he's going to go ahead and accept his option, which is about $28 million this year. Because realistically, he might know I might not get this money again. So I probably need to take it now while I can. Next up, Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward's an interesting guy. Obviously he got signed to a max deal by the Boston Celtics. And, he's expected to be that next guy, playing well, and really contributing. Obviously he got injured at the beginning of this first year. The Boston Celtics lost the whole year. Second year, that was the very shaky year with Kyrie Irving. Had to ease his way back into the lineup coming from that broken leg. Wasn't the same player we saw in Utah. This year he's played much better, much smoother, has been much more integrated. He's a guy I could give the max to, and I think he will get the max, so I'll go max just because of the player he can be. His game isn't predicated on athleticism. His game is more predicated off fundamentals. So even though he is a little bit older, he can still give you 18 to 19 a game. If I personally was a GM, I wouldn't give him the max. But in terms of if I think he's going to get it, I think a team will give him that money if they really want him. Because, he's one of those guys, multiple teams could use him. So that's what could raise the price up. And then that's what could get him an offered max contract. And that's why I think he'll end up maybe getting an offer for a max deal potentially. Unless, something else happens and they're like, okay, we're going to settle down on Gordon Hayward. Next, Fred VanVleet, point guard from the Toronto Raptors. He's an interesting case to me because I think a lot of people are intrigued to see what he's going to do if he had his own team and not be the backup. Like I said, some people think he's been better than Kyle Lowry, and Kyle Lowry got the max. He's still in his 20s, so Kyle VanVleet is still young enough that you wouldn't be like, okay, if we give it to him, this is going to be a bad investment in terms of age. It really just comes down to how important the point guard position is going to be on your team, and do you think he really can be a top point guard in this game? Because he showed he could score. He could score at the position, but can he be a guy that you can say, we need you to run our offense and put us in position to win most games? That's why I wouldn't be surprised, again, if he got a max deal. I'm going to go and say no max, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets something very close to the max because of the bidding that could be for him, and also the teams that could be more interested, or maybe like the Knicks or teams that have cap space that need maybe a guard. Like, oh, we could throw the money at Fred VanVleet, and we think he could be the point guard of the future for our franchise and move us in the right direction moving forward. So it'll be very interesting to see if potentially that could be a decision they actually end up making in the long term when it comes to the point guard position. And so that's my decision on Fred VanVleet. But that's all we have here for Max and No Max. Coming up next, we're going to talk about what if they did a play-in for the final 2 seeds in the playoffs now and moving forward right here on the podcast.
I want to talk to you guys about this amazing product I've been using lately called Hydrant. If you're like me and you want to kick the coffee habit, but you're worried about your energy levels depleting, to avoid the morning sluggishness and that midday slump, you need to make sure you're hydrated. It's super important. And that's where I've been using Hydrant. And for 25% off your first order, you can go to drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC at checkout. Hydrant is basically flavored electrolyte packets you mix directly into your water to make hydrating your body easy and delicious. And what I love about Hydrant, it's backed by research. The formula was developed by Oxford scientists to provide perfectly balanced, efficient hydration. Again, that's drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC for 25% off your first order. Another really cool thing about Hydrant, there's no synthetic colors or artificial sweeteners. The formula is vegan and you can choose between 3 different flavors or a variety pack. So for all my vegan friendly fellows out there, this one's for you. Again, this is drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment we talked about, well, we played a game called Max or No Max, where I discussed players that were coming up in the 2023 agency class. And I talked about if I was a GM, or in respective to what the market will probably be for them, if they're going to get a max or not a max. Obviously, I went down a list of a few guys. Like I said, next year's free agency class isn't really the most star-studded, but I think it was a good free agency class for depth, to getting good key players on your team, good guys who can maybe be your third option, maybe your second, some guys you can help build some pieces around. Like I said, it's not going to be the star-studded one like it is in 2021, but in 2020, I think you can still get some good value out of that free agency class. And like I said, you can tell, because I don't look at that free agent class and think, okay, max contracts are about to get handed out left and right, in my opinion. But you never know how the NBA is in this market, if that will be the case. But so, we're going to talk about the NBA doing this idea of potentially, this was said by Stephen A. Smith, potentially doing a play-in for the last two playoff spots between the 7th and 10th and 8th and 9th seeds. They would then have a play-in game to then decide who will be the final two seeds in the playoffs, because obviously, since the regular season didn't finish, teams were in the running to potentially still make the playoffs, and I can understand the NBA saying we don't want to just start the playoffs and then that we don't never know if they maybe could have got in, or would they, because you can't just sit here and say, yeah, whoever is currently in seeding right now will be the teams for absolute. So it's one of those types of things. So an idea is, could this be something that sticks around for the future? And what I mean by that is this an idea that could be around long term, where every year potentially you have playing games? If you did that, I think you'd have to make very strict rules. And what I mean by that is you'd have to do it where, basically, if you're within a certain number of games of those spots, you are eligible to make it into a play-in game. I would maybe say, 3 games, maybe 2 games of that spot, and you should be able to get a play-in. I think that would be smart, because I don't think if you're 7 games behind the 8th seed, you need to have a play-in. I just feel like, okay, we know they're not getting in. But, 1 game, listen, y'all are not that far apart in record. I can't sit here and say we don't think, if we had 2 more regular season games, the team who was a game ahead of you would have lost 2 straight and you would have won 2 straight. So, we'll give you a chance to, compete. Obviously, I know the NBA, remember, in the middle of the season, they were talking about making changes to the format of the playoffs, adding mid-season tournaments and play-in games, because I think NBA is trying to maximize and trying to add more compelling content to their league and bring more games that are meaningful to their league so more people will watch. Because think about it. Think about if on the last day of the regular season, the 8th and 9th seeds are, let's say they're tied, and they play their respective opponents. But let's say the 8th seed's going against the top seed, and the 9th seed is going against the worst in their conference. You may sit there and say, that's a little uneven, that's a little unfair. I mean, listen, it's basketball, so yeah, they can still win, but it's like, you have a better chance that the 9th seed's going to get in and the 8th seed's going to lose, especially if the 9th seed has a tiebreaker. So what if you just put them against each other? Obviously, because the record's the same, you would think maybe, okay, teams around the same, talents around the same, you know, so we can justify, you know, creating this tree, creating this play-in. It's something, like I said, that could add more excitement to the playoffs, just to see, okay, who's going to get in. And like I said, this also could be for money and star revenue, because think about it, like I've said, the NBA probably would rather the Pelicans get in than Memphis, because Zion Williamson, Zion versus LeBron in a playoff series, that would make more money and get more views than John Morant and the Memphis Grizzlies versus the LA Lakers. So I think that would be the preference. So you're basically now giving a chance for that. But even if they don't get in, you know, your next best team from a star potential would be Portland because of Damian Lillard. So it maybe gives you the chance to potentially get the stars in that you want, potentially, that may not be in the greatest teams, but you can still get them in there. Because you always hear it every year with the finals that, you know, obviously the NBA has they always this like secret agenda. The NBA would like these teams with the most stars and the most storylines to make it to the finals, because that's going to get the most ratings, that's going to get the most looks, that's going to get the most viewers. That's why everybody's like, well, we hope we get Clippers-Lakers, because that's going to bring the most eyes, that's going to bring the most views, people are going to want to talk about it more. If it's Denver and Utah, it's like, I mean, yeah, but if you like basketball, it's basketball, but we ain't trying to talk about Jamal Murray versus Donovan Mitchell. Like, I mean, it's a good matchup, don't get me wrong, but like I said, you have to really love the game. If a casual fan is like Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Jamal Murray, like, I mean, they're fine, but you know, people want to hear about LeBron. They want to hear about Kawhi. They want to hear about Paul George. They want to hear about Anthony Davis. You know, they want to hear about Giannis. You know, they want to hear about those guys. And so, you know, that also could be one of the reasons why these play-in games are here. You know, and why it's something that they may want to keep around. Because, you know, you always have this idea, could there always be this secret agenda behind a rule change? Could it be a secret agenda behind this changing or something being formatted differently? You know, remember, the finals a long time ago, literally I think till I believe the 2010s or at the end of the 2000s, was a 2-3-2 format, which was a very weird format because every other playoff series is 2-2-1-1-1. So it was always weird because think about it. If you're the team who has the lower record, or has the least record in the finals, you would still get 3 straight home games at home, and you know this perception, you know, home court advantage matters. Literally, you could steal a game and then win 3 home games and win the series 4-1, and never had to hit the road again. You know, it makes it more complicated. It's 2 here because you're trying to steal one. And then you try to win your home game. What if they steal one back? And then you go back there. Can you steal another one? And then you go back there. Can you steal that one? And then game 7. Where you go 2-3-2, it's like, if the team who has home court advantage can get out of that with at least a 3-2 or a 3-2 in their favor, or a 3-2 in the road's favor, they're going to be like, well, we got 2 home games, so we can push it to 7. I mean, you could maybe say that's a more likely format to get you to game 7 maybe, but it was just a weird format because not the rest of the playoffs was formatted like that. So, you know, it's something that, like I said, if they do want to add these 2 play-in games for both conferences, it'll be interesting. I feel like the Western Conference needs more than the Eastern Conference, because I feel like the Eastern Conference, even though there was enough games left, it did kind of feel like the 7th, 8th spot was kind of decided, in my opinion. But like I said, I guess if you want to give Washington that chance, you know, to get in, you know, I guess, you know, why not? You know, if you want to give Detroit that chance to get in, you know, why not? Or Chicago. You know, I mean, it really just depends on you and what you want to do. So it definitely creates a very interesting, you know, situation and dilemma in my book if they do add the 2 play-in games permanently after this season, but I do think that is something that, like I said, could add excitement to the game of basketball, which is obviously the number one thing they want to do is how can we make this game more exciting for everybody? How can we make this game more exciting for people to watch? And maybe this is an idea that they think they can really execute and get more viewers on to watching the game of basketball. But coming up next, who is the most influential player in the game right now? I'll give you a few candidates and tell you why right here on the podcast.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we discussed about the NBA potentially doing a play-in for the last 2 playoff spots in each conference, what that would mean, how people would take it. You know, it'd be interesting if they went ahead and tried to do something like that, to me. So it would be interesting to see if that's something that they actually end up doing. I discussed some of the thoughts behind it, the thought process behind it, and, you know, just trying to see, you know, what actually ends up happening if they do that, and if it's something they want to keep around for future years, just in terms of just normal playoff play-ins coming into the future. So that's going to be very interesting to see what happens moving forward. But now we're going to have another discussion where we'll discuss who is potentially one of the most influential players in the NBA. There's a lot of players in the game who, you know, people keep up with, people talk about, fans of, love, you know, appreciate, cherish, all of that. But who is the guy who has influenced the game a lot? I think if you were the casual fan, you would maybe think someone like LeBron. you know, and because, you know, he was the guy coming out of high school, the chosen one. He is probably our most well-known, popular NBA player we have in the game today. He provides huge ratings. You know, he's a guy who is almost like the player ambassador of all ambassadors that currently still plays in the NBA right now. It's LeBron James. You know, kid from Akron, poor neighborhood, gave back, and has gone through a lot of trial and tribulation. Also one of the most polarizing players in our game. So it's just, there's a lot there, which you could understand why they maybe go with LeBron maybe as an influential player. Because I think he has inspired people, of course. I feel like people look at LeBron and think, wow, you know, he's done so much for the league. He's done so much for people. He's done so much for Cleveland. You know, he might have inspired a new generation to not be afraid to rep where you live and remember, you know, your roots, no matter how big you become, and always try to be humble in most situations and things like that. You know, I think that could be something that helps LeBron be viewed as very influential in a lot of people's eyes, you know, because of the fact that, you know, he was the guy coming out of high school, and, you know, he was the guy who, like I said, brought a championship to Cleveland, and like I said, has done the things he's done. Obviously, LeBron right now in his career is becoming like a Mongol. He's doing a lot of out of basketball projects right now, giving back TV shows, entertainment. And so he's definitely maybe an influential model for businessmen if you're a person who wants to make money through other businesses, if you're not maybe athletic enough to do a sport yourself. Some people might sit here and tell you potentially one of the most influential players in the game today is a guy like Kevin Durant. Now, that might be surprising to some people, but some people might look up to Kevin Durant and think, you know, Kevin Durant inspires me because of the fact that he's the kind of guy who feels like, in his opinion, he always keeps it real with himself. He doesn't try to fake it. He doesn't try to be someone he's not. He doesn't try to hide behind anything. He's just very straight up about who he is all the time, and will tell you how he thinks. He is one of the few guys in the league who's very straightforward with their thinking, and always will tell you how they feel, and just, you know, a guy who, you know, he's starting to kind of get into the business aspect of everything, and trying to put himself out there in a different name and a different light, potentially. You know, so obviously he's a guy who some people may view as influential. But there's one person in my mind that I think is more influential than all of them. And I've discussed this a few times on the podcast. I've mentioned a few times in the podcast and previous arguments and discussions we've had, where I think Steph Curry is the most influential basketball player today in the NBA. Because of, again, he legitimately changed the game of basketball. The game before was more of a big man's game, and the guards could shoot threes and run offenses and get some assists. And then if you could hit a three, great. And remember, the three-point shot was always looked at as a bad shot. You know, if you weren't a great three-point shooter, if you took that shot, that would get you benched. Nowadays, you know, he started the trend of shooting over half court, and that's always been traditionally known as a bad shot. And now you can shoot that shot 7 times a game, miss all 7, and not get benched, because now it's normalized in today's game. You know, Steph has just done so much for the game. I mean, his influence is felt not just at the NBA level. Think about college. They pushed the 3-point line back. Nobody never talked about pushing the 3-point line back until Steph Curry got in the game. So I believe the 3-point line in college was like a long 2 in the NBA. Because again, remember, the 3-point shot was never as important. So you didn't have a lot of college kids coming in there thinking, I gotta have the 3-point shot. Now, you have the 3-point line pushed back. And now you got more guys coming into college who are able to shoot from that range. And so now it creates this more dynamic scoring. And also it's made the game more exciting. You know how cause think about it. It's literally before you would have to wait till they get to a certain point on the court. Then the play and the basketball play would starting to get going. Literally with guys like Steph and Trae Young and Devin Booker, as soon as they crack half court, are they pulling up? You're more attentive. You want to watch. You want to see. You're more interested. There's more of a view there. There's more of a distinct, just like what's going to happen. Is he going to pull up from the logo? Steph did that. He changed that. He's the reason why kids now feel like, Dad, Mom, I got to practice on shooting from range. Layups and stuff is fine, but I got to shoot threes. Because if I want to make it to the NBA, I got to hit the three ball. If I want to stay in the NBA, I got to hit the three ball. Steph has literally changed AAU tournaments. Before it was just a dunk show, and it still is a dunk show. But now you have a lot of kids shooting from three. Being a 3-point sniper is almost just as important as getting to the rim. Because again, the 3-point shot is worth more than the 2-point shot. So if you can shoot the three, that will definitely increase your value. Definitely increase your value. Back when you would hear scouting reports on guys coming out of college, you used to never hear people say, oh, he couldn't shoot the three. He's a bit of a risk. He can't shoot the three ball. We don't know if he's ever going to develop it. Because like I said, the game was different, so you didn't have to ever develop the three ball. Now, if you're a guard and you're not good at shooting the three, it's on your scouting report. Can't shoot the three. And then you're going to start getting played like Ben Simmons. And they're not going to respect you when you're behind the 3-point line. Which you have seen how that can actually affect a game, especially in the playoffs when you've seen Ben Simmons. Because if they take away what you do most and you can't shoot the outside shot, then what you going to do? Because think about it, when LeBron came into the league, remember, he could not shoot. LeBron was a streaky shooter. He was a guy, was not really good just on a normal day of shooting jump shots. But if he could get his rhythm, he could shoot it out the gym. It's just, that was the only time he could really shoot it. And he developed a mid-range, and he developed a 3-point shot throughout his career where now he's pretty, you don't want to leave LeBron open. LeBron can knock down 5 out of 7 threes now. 6 out of 8. Before he couldn't. Now you have to. Steph Curry effect. The Steph Curry effect. He has influenced how everybody plays the game, how the game has changed to an up and down game, to a 3-point game, people pulling up on fast breaks, all of that, Steph Curry. And you gotta give Klay Thompson some love too, because without him, without the other splash bro, they all contributed to that 3-point barrage now. And that's why I think Steph Curry is the most influential player in the NBA today, because of what the game he plays was just so different and so ahead of its time. And everybody was trying to catch up to Steph Curry, which always was one of the reasons why Golden State had the dynasty that they had. Well, that's all we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to discuss the future of the center position in the NBA. Will it ever make a comeback? All that right here and more on the podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. So, last segment we discussed most influential player in the NBA, in my opinion, which I talked about LeBron, I talked about KD, but at the end of the day, I believe that Steph Curry is the most influential basketball player in the NBA just because of his influence on the game, how he's changed the game, how the game has shifted from where it was to where it is now. And I think that's something that you have to accredit to him and his 3-point prowess. You know, how he made the 3-point shot go from a bad shot to a good shot, and not just right, like just behind the line, like all the way back to the logo, and being able to make it at an efficient clip. And now you see so many players in the league copying that. Now teams are adjusting to a 3-point set. Everybody needs 3 and Ds. You know, it's 3, 3, 3, 3 everywhere. You need at least 4 people on the floor who can shoot a 3. You need at least 4. If you can have one player who can't shoot a 3, but if you have more than 2 players that can't shoot a 3, it's like you can't win that way. You're a liability. But obviously that was my opinion. Obviously, I'm sure you guys have yours. I'm sure you guys have certain opinions. I'm sure you have certain thoughts about it in your opinion. But everybody's opinion is welcome. Everybody's opinion is relevant. That's one thing I want to definitely let that be clear. We can sit here and debate and say what's the right answer. But remember, I always feel like there is no right answer. It's just what you feel in your heart of hearts. But so we're going on to our next topic. Where is the center position now? Where can it be in the future? Can it ever make a comeback? Obviously, the center position was a position that was identified as a guy who was usually at 6'10", you were considered undersized. So it was usually 6'11" up. And you know, you could put your back against the basket, make post moves, maybe have a nice little hook shot, something like that. Maybe can shoot a little bitty jump shot, but primarily your job was to block, rebound, defend, and be able to score in the paint. Now, if remember years ago, like almost a decade ago, really, where, you know, you had some true centers still like Dwight Howard in the league, and yet there were so many players who were becoming more versatile and being able to play multiple positions that the issue with the All-Star ballots was you were having so many good forwards that were better than the centers. People felt like you're putting players in there who don't necessarily deserve to be in just because of position, when you have guys who deserve to be in but can't because there's just so many players at that position. So then obviously eventually the NBA decided to take center off of the All-Star ballots, and it just became guards and forwards. So that was one of the first things that kind of showed the change in the center position and its relevance. Now you have so many fours, a lot of power forwards who play center. Center is not a very enjoyable position based off what a lot of NBA players say. You hear it all the time from guys like Kevin Love and Tristan Thompson and Boogie's a center. That's the wrong example. But, you know, a lot of guys who play the forward. Tim Duncan, another example. He was very adamant. He did not like playing center. The difference between power forward and center are night and day, especially in today's game. See, power forward, you can put LeBron at the forward. You can put Melo at the forward. You can put, if you wanted to, you could put Luka at the forward. Like it's becoming somewhat of a positionless position. That's why they say basketball is becoming just positionless basketball in today's league. So, center, you're the one who's really going to be dealing with all the battles, all the rebounding in the paint. And so I can understand why a player who can deal with it from time to time like you used to as a power forward now is like, well, do I really want to play it? But with the league becoming positionless basketball, you're now starting to have 3s and 4s play center. So now other teams are having their 3s and 4s play center. So now you're not even having any real big men on the court. You're just having guys who are very athletic, who are bigger than most guys, but very athletic, could shoot, extend the floor, and it's just a big game of, okay, who's going to spread out and collapse the paint and shoot threes and all of that. And so it's interesting. You know, will the center position ever get back the prominence. Will it ever get back to where it was, where people were very adamant about having a center? Now, true centers are still in the game, but there's not a lot, clearly. Obviously, some you can mention. You can say DeAndre Jordan, Andre Drummond, Dwight Howard. Obviously, there are a couple of people to name a few. You know, Marc Gasol. Guys like that. What you're seeing in the center position is that if you're going to be a true center, you have to be able to affect the game in different ways. Or Joker, obviously, another guy. And Joker is actually a good example because, see, the thing about the Joker is he could stretch the floor as a 7-footer, but then obviously what is Joker's best strength? He is probably the best passing big man in the game. So now he can use that frame, be bigger than you, and still be able to find the right guy or be able to take the jump shot if it's there. Well, before, centers really couldn't do that a lot, or there wasn't a very large amount of them who could. You have to be a more skillful big man to play center. And if you notice, all of the most skillful centers are not American centers. They're foreign centers from different countries. Joker isn't from here. Like I've said multiple times, overseas, they teach regardless of position, they teach every position fundamentals of shooting, passing, rebounding, everything. So you have guys like Joker coming to the league. Yes, he's bigger than everybody. And yes, sometimes that frustrates you because he's like, well, you're bigger. You should be able to use your offensive game and drop 30 on anybody. But he has the ability to pass it, get 10 assists. He has the ability to stretch the floor and hit the three, which makes him a center, or what you want to call today's NBA center, work. You got to be skillful to play center in the NBA. Back in the day, realistically, you didn't have to be a skillful center. If you could dominate on the boards, that was good enough to get you in the game. If you could dominate in the post, that was good enough to get you in the game. Now, yeah, you might be able to get us post baskets, but remember, it's a 3-point game now. You give me twos, going against Golden State, Steph can come back down the floor, over half court, 3, bang. Now you're down 1. So, it's not necessarily as valued as it used to be. And I think that's why the value of the position has diminished so much, unless you are a skillful center. Obviously, also, if you're not skillful, a lot of teams do, like you see it with the Lakers, is like with JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard, a lot of these guys are known for, rebounding is going to be super important still in this game. Rebounding is still valuable. Rebounding will be valuable in any league. Well, not any league. Well, any basketball league, regardless. Their job is to rebound, catch alley-hoops, and putbacks. You can make a career out of catching alley-hoops, putbacks, and rebounding in the NBA. So you don't even have to have an offensive game. If you can get 10 to 14 points off alley-hoops and putbacks, that's good enough to get you on a roster. Because think about it. Everybody's shooting from 3. That usually causes long rebounds. Well, what if you're able to get the rebound? Remember, the floor is spread. You may be the only person down there with whoever your man is. Or if you get the rebound, it's a one-on-one putback. Where back in the day, remember, the paint was more collapsed, so you weren't just battling that one person. You were battling the entire team, or the power forward and the small forward for that rebound, because everybody was already collapsing the paint to begin with, and everybody was taking shots closer to the paint to begin with. Where now everybody's so spread out, it's usually, if you are the bigger guy, you get that rebound, easy putback. And so that's why the center position, if it ever makes a comeback or ever becomes as valuable, it won't be because it became the old center position that it used to be. It's because the new age of center basketball has came in. You have more skillful centers, and they're able to use that and remain very relevant in this league, where people will say, we still need that 7-foot guy who can get rebounds and putbacks. And if they have the ability to shoot the 3 or pass or be elite rebounding wise, he is still very valuable for what we would want on our team moving forward. So that was my little spiel in the center position, if I think they're ever going to make a comeback. But coming up next to end the show, I'm going to talk about how I would rebuild the Detroit Pistons and how I could get them and bring them back to relevancy in the NBA right here on the podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the center position. And will the center position ever come back to being the position of what it used to be, how important the position could be? Remember when in the 90s and 80s, especially when it was a big man league, we've had so many great centers that came through the league, and just to see it become so diminished. But like I said, the key for the center position to become important again is that the center position has to evolve. You don't always necessarily have to hit the three, even though that will help, but just the ability to be more skillful as a center. Or if you aren't that skilled, be able to do something very well that a team's going to be like, hey, you know, when he comes in this game, we have an advantage in this regard. That's what you kind of got to do when you bring in a center to the game, and how the center position can potentially go back to where it was and potentially get the same prominence and respect that it used to get back when basketball was more closer to the rim, more of a 2-point game now than a 3-point game. But now I'm going to continue what I've been doing. As I've been talking about teams that I revealed that are currently tanking, or in the record of tanking right now, lottery teams. So this week's team, or today's episode's team actually, we're going to talk about the Detroit Pistons. Now, the Detroit Pistons have a very storied basketball franchise. Obviously, the Bad Boy Pistons in the 90s. In the late 80s, early 90s. Obviously, the Detroit Pistons in the mid-2000s with, Rip Hamilton, Gerald Wallace, and not Gerald Wallace. Well, was it Gerald Wallace on that team? I remember him on the Charlotte Bob. Was he? I need to check that. But Ben Wallace, actually. I think there was both Wallace brothers on there. I mean, not brothers, but like both Wallaces. And then, obviously Chauncey Billups and them. And obviously, this past decade, they haven't been the same team. They've had a lot of misses. They've had a lot of mediocrity. And basically, they've just struggled to find that right formula to really get somewhere. The most prominence they had was when they took, when I would say the season that LeBron, I think, first got to Cleveland and they played them. And even though they got swept, it was, I called it one of the toughest 4-game series I've seen. Cause they played very well. They had a lot of young up and coming talent, and now they're at a point where we don't know where Detroit is. Obviously, one of the big reasons is because of Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin has been injured the last 2 years. And, I mean, not like the last NBA season, he was injured a little bit, but he played well. Blake Griffin has always been a solid player. Guy who can go out, get you to mid, can now hit the three a little bit, and always been somebody who, has been known as a dunker early in his career. Obviously getting older, so, he's not trying to do that to the same extent, but, Blake Griffin's is still a very good player in this game. Obviously, they had Andre Drummond. They let him go. They traded him to the Cleveland Cavaliers. A lot of people were very critical of the package that they got back in return, but sometimes you get to that point where you gotta get rid of a guy. And so you're not going to be as picky in terms of what you're going to ask back, because you got to be realistic. If you really want to get rid of a guy and you ask for too much and he's not going to get you that type of value, you're going to be stuck with him as Cleveland. So you start over there. They have a nice up-and-coming young player in Christian Wood. He's played very well. They got rid of Reggie Jackson. So point guard is now a position open, even though Derrick Rose has reemerged. But obviously, I think Derrick Rose is a guy who they'll probably dangle out there as trade bait in the future, potentially for a playoff teams. I don't think he'll be a part of a real building roster. So I could definitely see Derrick Rose being off the roster, and, they have some pieces, some young guys, but, there's still a lot of work to be done here. Obviously, first things first, I think you want to establish yourself as a point guard. If they get a top 3 pick, they're one of the guys. Like, if they don't get 1 or 2, they're one of the guys that I think if they were like the 3rd pick, they need to go after Lemelo Ball. Get you that point guard. And if Derrick Rose stays for his last year of his deal, you have a guy, who can help Lemelo Ball. And you can build the team around him. Or maybe they're a team that could go out into the Fred VanVleet sweepstakes potentially, and maybe try to pick him up, make him the point guard of Detroit. It just depends. Do you want to start really young, or do you want to go with somebody who's a little bit more established in the league, but you have to pay more money to? Obviously, they're just a team that doesn't have just enough talent. Luke Kennard has been okay, their draft pick from 2 years ago. They've been decent. They have a nice young player. I can't remember his name right now, but I believe he was 19 years old. He was creating highlights before the season was stopped. A guy who shows much potential in being a guy who you could, see as a potential contributor to this team long term. Detroit is a city that is not considered a big city, but it's a known city. And right now, in their current condition, they probably won't be able to get free agents. But they can still build through the draft and sign good players. One thing you got to understand about rebuilding is you don't have to hit the star automatically. You draft and you see if you get a star, but you still surround the team with decent players, because you don't want to necessarily surround a star player with no talent and then now you're trying to catch up by giving him talent, because that sometimes can backfire on you. Because what if the talent never works out, and so now you're stuck with a situation where your star player might be disgruntled even though you drafted him. The talent you're putting around him isn't good enough. And I think this may be something they don't want to do, but Blake Griffin may be a guy that, again, you might need to look to trade. You could get more value back for Blake Griffin than probably Andre Drummond. Only difference is that Blake Griffin's been hurt, so that might hurt it a little bit. But Blake Griffin, I think you can get something back. I feel like they're one of those teams you got to kind of clean house a little bit. You clean house with Drummond and you clean house with Reggie Jackson, you might as well let go of Blake Griffin too. It's not like you're going to be winning a championship with him, unless you have some plan in place that you think, well, we can bring in somebody and then pair him with Blake, and we'll see how that goes. If you want to try that experiment, then go ahead, be my guest. But, Detroit has some decisions they have to make. Obviously, they're a team that can be a team with a great fan base that the fan base will embrace if they put a better product on the floor. I think they need to build through the draft. And that's why I'm saying, listen, you can accumulate some picks, maybe get a role player or two back for Blake Griffin, depending on who was interested, who's willing to get with. Listen, you could do this. Maybe you trade Blake Griffin for a young up-and-coming player at another position. Obviously, those trades are harder to do because teams are like, well, why would we give him up for somebody who's older? So they might have to throw a pick in there or something like that. But you could try that. Or you could wait for a free agency. Listen, a guy I could see going to Detroit in a couple of years, I'm calling it now. Obviously, we've discussed before John Collins from the Atlanta Hawks. They are not really sure if they want to give him the money he will ask for because of his defensive liability. But John is a walking 2010 guy. It's in about 2 years, his contract will be up because he only has 1 year left. And then after that, I believe he will be out of his deal, his rookie deal. If the Detroit keeps him for another year, Blake Griffin, and they let him go at the end of that year, I could see Detroit going after a John Collins, guy who'd be like 24, 25, You know he's going to give you 20 and 10. You might give him the max. He's going to demand around $20 million a year. 4 years, $80 million potentially. 4 years, $90 potentially. Guy giving you 20 and 10. I think, and then John Collins has been banged up, but he has been more, for the most part, outside of the suspension, has been relatively still be able to play and been on the floor. And you would still not lose the offensive production that you have with Blake Griffin while also getting younger. And that's kind of the things you have to look at when you're kind of rebuilding a team like Detroit. How can we maybe get younger but still stay with talent or potential talent? Maybe another disgruntled guy that can maybe try to go after, maybe a Zach LaVine. Like I said, you got to take advantage of all these things. You got to unturn every stone. You got to make sure you hit on the draft pick this year and make sure you pick up key free agents that can fill out the team and fit the vision of what you want the Detroit Pistons to be, and bring back that Detroit basketball that all the Detroit fans have missed and have cherished over the years. But that's all we have for you right here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I was your host, Brice Lewis. I appreciate you tuning in for another great show for us. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts, please leave a review. I really appreciate it. Or also check out our other amazing podcasts on the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you and have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.